everybody. Welcome back to a Cult of Misfits. I am Matt Owens. I want to tell you about a little analogy that the universe dropped into my brain this afternoon. It has to do with breaking free from your own mental imprisonment. We're going to talk about duality. I want to talk a little bit about politics. Not too much, just a touch. I want to talk about heaven, higher realms. I want to talk about the gods. I want to talk about the Nephilim. A lot of fun stuff. So on my walk this afternoon, got a little analogy that helped me out a little bit. When I first started this spiritual journey, I started listening to a lot of people who were talking about gaining freedom, breaking free from the matrix, taking a red pill, gaining enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, right? And many of the spiritual teachings talked about how we're in a prison of our own mind. We are only trapped in a matrix if we believe that we're trapped in a matrix. But the truth is that from a higher perspective, we're able to leave that cage at any time. And the only thing that's keeping us from leaving that cage are fears, doubts, limiting beliefs. So the analogy was a Star Trek one, where I'm in the holding cell and there's a force field keeping me imprisoned. And I can walk out of the cell at any time, but there's that force field there. And the force field will only let me pass through. It will not allow my fears, my doubts, and my limiting beliefs to come through the force field. I've got to leave those all in the holding cell. And that's the whole trick to this little escape game of ours. this little Harry Houdini trick that many of us think that we need to do. To break free from this cycle of karma, break free from this cycle of life. A lot of the ancient stories talk about how we need to break free. The ancient wisdom talks about that. And so for me, I'm a big fan of freedom. Even if that means freeing myself from my own thoughts, and my own mind. And so what I'm trying to do is pass through this force field. And it's a process of slowly letting go of all the things that I'm clutching very tightly. Right? And years ago, when I started this journey of mine of stepping out of the prison, stepping through the force field to gain freedom, it's a slow process of taking examination of what I'm holding so tightly onto and why I'm holding so tightly onto them. And upon examination over the years, lots of examination, I realized that I was clutching onto them because I was scared of letting them go, right? But it's those very things that I'm afraid to let go of that the universe is gently whispering in my ear, let it go. None of it matters. Just let it go. And so I slowly, I'm in a white knuckle phase, and then like slowly just learning to release, to release, to release. And it's part of my natural inclination as a human being to start clutching onto things again. So it's a constant practice that gets easier over time. Let me just tell you from my perspective, it gets easier, but I have to remain vigilant because it's real easy to start latching onto something. Oh no, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen here? And just letting it go. Everything is happening for a reason. Everything always works out divinely, right? And it's just about getting myself into a state of relaxation, all right? Spiritually, mentally, and physically. I think that one of the large things for me, at least, that was keeping me imprisoned, that is helping my escape process, is letting go of duality. I talk about it frequently because I think it's really important. It's important in my life, at least, to let go of duality. We're in this 3D realm of ours that we found ourselves in, and it's a very dualistic place, right? There's good, there's evil, there's black, there's white, there's up and down, there's us and there's them. Let's try that again. Yeah, us and them. I said that right. My brain was like, nope, and then we're good. But once I started breaking free from this duality, this us versus them, because there's a lot of victimhood tied into it as well, right? A lot of blame. Look at what those guys are doing to us, right? Whether those guys are the government or the pharmaceutical companies or Bill Gates or, the deep state or demons and Nephilim, or there's always somebody that's doing us wrong, right? It's their fault that Earth is like this. It's their fault that I'm unhealthy. It's because they put chemicals in everything. There's always somebody to blame. But once I started consciously and slowly breaking free from that cycle, that pattern of blame and victimhood, that us versus them mentality started to dissolve. That duality, because you start to realize once you start practicing these sorts of things, you start to see it from a different perspective, a higher perspective, perhaps, and you start to realize what people who have taken mushrooms will tell you and confirm for you, that everything is one. We're all interconnected, and so all of these entities or other people or governmental bodies or corporations or whoever the bad guy is, according to you, according to me, I had to realize that they're really just another aspect of me, which is to say, another aspect of the divine. Part of my belief system, I believe that divinity is experiencing its own creation in the form of Matt Owens in this 3D realm called Earth. And that you and me and the rocks and the trees and the fax machines, if they still exist, are all a part of the one, all a part of the everything. And so when I hate another human being for what they're doing, or if I hate the demons for what they're doing, or it's poison in my own heart. And so I had to get myself to a place where I wanted to cleanse that poison out. And it took a while because I'd been pumping that poison into my heart for quite some time. The programming ran deep, as it does with, I would say, most humans, right? And so if you're one of those people who is on this journey of freedom, I would suggest analyzing the duality in your life. Because I would argue that it's keeping you imprisoned. It's a trap. It's a dualistic trap. And maybe you're not into politics anymore, but you definitely latched onto one cause, right? Or I was trying to think of examples, but you know what I'm talking about. There's lots of them out there. The government is doing this. They need to be stopped, right? Bill Gates is doing this. He needs to be stopped. But it's about just seeing it from another person's perspective. Let's just talk about Bill Gates for a second. He's considered the bad guy in many circles, right? Um, for openly wanting to depopulate the earth, right? For many years, I thought he was a bad guy. Like, what a monster. He just blatantly and openly talks about depopulating the earth. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means killing a lot of people, right? Reducing the population. But it's about seeing things from another perspective, right? You have your belief systems. I have my belief systems. Well, Bill Gates has his belief systems too. And there is no right and wrong. It's just a matter of perspective. There is no good and evil. That's a matter of perspective. Yeah, but in the Bible it says that's an opinion. That's a matter of perspective. That is one book. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying it's a perspective. If I were Bill Gates and I had endless wealth and endless power, essentially, right? And I had very strong opinions about the population of the earth being imbalanced, I would probably take things into my own hands like he is as well, or at least he's talking about doing, right? Or is rumored to have been doing, right? And I know it's not a popular thing to talk about depopulation, and I'm not for or against it. We're just talking about it philosophically here. But it's about seeing things from their perspective. There's a lot of people, yes, mostly happen to be billionaires and world leaders and people in places of power, right? Who are serious about talking about depopulation. And then it's really easy to shake your fist at the war machine, right? Um, the military industrial complex, etc. You know, murdering everybody out there. But just for a second, just philosophically, just for funsies, what if the Earth was too populated and we just didn't know it? Right? What if there was something maybe spiritual we didn't understand or biological or something, and there are too many people on the planet, and these billionaires don't trust the rest of us dum-dums down here to understand, that a lot of you guys need to die, otherwise we got problems here on the planet for reasons that maybe you can't understand, right? And again, I'm not a proponent of murder. I'm not a proponent of any of these things. We're just talking about it. We're just talking about it philosophically. Because he believes people like him believe that he's doing the right thing for the planet. And perhaps he is doing it selfishly. Perhaps he is doing it for his own personal gain and wealth and prestige and power, etc. Sure. But this is just a practice of seeing things from other people's perspectives, right? That's all we're doing here. This is how I started detaching myself from all these dualistic things, right? Politics. There's always something to shake your fist at. There's always somebody who's not going to agree with you, especially this day and age, Now they're the enemy. Now they're the bad guy, right? But just recognizing that they are another version of the divine. Namaste. The divine in me sees the divine in you and says, hello. I see you, right? The guy that cuts me off in traffic, he is also the divine, there to teach me a lesson. Everything serves its purpose. And so if you're on this journey of trying to free yourself, consider letting go of duality, right? Because when I started auditing my own life, I started realizing like almost everything I'm doing is dualistic, right? Thanks to the human condition. But the more that I've let go of it, the more that I've felt free. I feel free from all of it. I often talk about I don't watch the news anymore or follow, the hot topics, the latest trends, unless, I happen to pass by a newspaper. So it feels good to be detached, and it goes against our programming. It goes against what we're used to. And so, there's a transitional period for sure. You can't just let everything go all at once. Your human system will panic. So it's just about letting stuff go one at a time, right? Nice and easy. Nice and easy. Calm down. Take a breath. None of this really matters in the way that you think it does, right? And so much of it is fear-based, right? Well, what about the children? What about the Ukrainians? What about the North Koreans? What about the immigrants? What about the underprivileged? There's always somebody who's having something done to them, right? And it's real easy to get real riled up about it. But at the end of the day, I believe that a lot of that is just feeling out of control because you're trying to control a situation that you can't really control or really make a dent in oftentimes, right? These things are too big oftentimes for us. And so it's overwhelming and we tend to panic and freak out. I know I did. During my awakening in 2020, part of that was just seeing things in a different light. And I'm like, holy shit. Holy shit. The whole pandemic and, the vaccines and masks and politics and, the big pharma. And I went down rabbit holes and I was in a panic spiral, right? This cyclone of fear that I got caught up in, but it was my own cyclone. I created it, right? And so, um, once I went through that process, I realized that my life was just so much calmer and simpler and more peaceful when I just started letting go of that stuff. What do I care what the Democrats are doing? What do I care what the Republicans are doing? What do I care what Trump is doing or not doing? Or what happened on January 6th? Or, just all of these hot button issues. It feels really good and freeing to just say, I don't care about them anymore. And when I say I don't care about them anymore, I don't give them my emotional energy anymore. And for me, that was so freeing to let that go. It was a huge burden on my shoulders, constantly stressing me out. So anyway, let's switch gears. Let's talk about. I want to talk about heaven and hell. I was recently having a conversation with my niece about things of a spiritual nature, right? And she said, "Well, do you believe in heaven?" And I said, "Well, I grew up in a Christian household, so of course that was a part of my belief system. But as a part of the stripping away of all my beliefs and the rebuilding of who I am now today, was reanalyzing Christianity and my thoughts towards religion, which I've talked about a lot previously. Um, so I said, well, I don't know. I feel like we don't actually die. I believe that our souls are eternal. And so I think that my human avatar will perish at some point. And then I just sort of go to the next realm, right? Out into the great beyond, the universe, if you will. But I started thinking about more and more after that conversation with my niece. And I do believe in a heavenly realm. I don't necessarily think it's a cloud kingdom with angels and harps, um, but I do believe that there's a realm above this one, and I also believe there's a realm below this one, and I think that it might be infinite in both directions, right? And I'm of course thinking about this very dualistically and linearly, like a good human would, because that's just what our brains do. But I think that there's an infinite amount of realms that we can advance or retreat into, right? And I think it's all based on our frequency, based on our energy, where we're vibrating at. So, um, do some people go to the lower realm, the underworld? Sure, but I think, I think there's a heavenly realm above us, and I think that because I've been listening to a lot of near-death experiencers, and there's just tens of thousands of them, and they're not all religious or spiritual people. A lot of them are atheists. A lot of them are like, I'm very scientific. I'm a marine biologist, or I'm a neurosurgeon, and I just if I can't see it and I can't measure it, then it doesn't exist, and so I don't believe in any of that shit. So just listening to a lot of people describing a heavenly realm, right? Meeting God, meeting Jesus, meeting their ancestor, or whatever form it happens to take. Um, of course, the argument is that it's all in our minds, and it's all just a biological process that our minds are doing, and we're not actually leaving into another realm. Um, but I happen to think that it's there. I happen to think that it's there, where it's just this realm of pure joy, love, peace. There is no fear, and I think that perhaps we ascend there once we are able to shed our fear, shed our duality, shed our doubts and our limiting beliefs and our guilt, and the long list of things that are perhaps keeping us down here in this realm, right? Saddlebags keeping us down. And once we let those things go, we can float away into the clouds. So yes, I do believe there's a heavenly realm, and I don't think that the lower realms, or the nether regions, if you will, are punishment. I don't think that it's a system of punishment, but I think it's just based on your vibration. And I think that maybe during the dark ages there was a lot more people going down, for example, than were going up, because we were just in a dark place vibrationally on this planet. But um, I think that we are on a place of a mass awakening eventually. I think that that's the end goal here, and I just feel like the energy on this planet is changing in a good and positive way. Um, and then I start thinking about, like, just the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians and all these ancient cultures that I've been really diving into lately. And almost all of them talk about a pantheon of gods, right? They all have these higher and lower gods, or demigods, or supreme gods, or whatever. There's a pecking order to these things, according to all of the ancient mythologies from across the world. And I talk a lot about the flood story that's in nearly every ancient culture across the planet, even though there is no logical way that they ever spoke to each other, but they all have this flood story, which I find intriguing, right? And so then I start asking myself, like, are these meant to be stories, or like, is this meant to be taken literally? Because um, I know what convention says. I know what mainstream scholars say, that it's all myth. It's all just stories meant to be used as parables. Um, and I believe that for the longest time, but of course I'm questioning it. Like, well, maybe it's meant to be taken literally. The whole difference between all of the philosophies and religions in the past and Christianity was, all of the sudden everybody believed that these gods were sort of metaphors, and they were just sort of meant to represent humanity in its highest form, etc. But it was the Christians that came along that said, no, we're going to start taking these things literally. That everything that's written down literally happened, um, much to the surprise of everybody else in the region, because up until that point, nobody had taken it literally, right? And that's sort of how Christianity was started. Um, and so I'm starting to question, maybe this stuff is meant to be taken literally, that the gods actually did walk amongst us in ancient Egypt, or um, ancient Mesopotamia, where they, in the ancient Mesopotamian cultures, and there are a bunch of them. That's an umbrella term for ancient Mesopotamia. Is an umbrella term for the Sumerians and the Akkadians and the Babylonians, and there's a list of people that lived there for thousands of years, right? But they're all under the umbrella of the Mesopotamians. And so the Mesopotamians talked about the Nephilim. I'm sorry, the Anunnaki coming down to the planet, and 693 on the license plate that's right next to me. Um, and so I'm starting to wonder if that's meant to be taken literally, or if they were just stories of their best guess as to how creation came to be, right? But it's very interesting that across all of these cultures, you see in the ancient carvings in South America, and in Turkey and Mexico, and in the East, across the planet is what I'm getting at. There's these depictions of these gods that are on the level of the Anunnaki, that supposedly came to this planet and seeded Earth with the humans, created the humans, and in all of these depictions of these gods in these various cultures across the world that could have never talked to each other, they all have depictions of these gods that are holding these handbags. They're like these little purses, real cute, couture, obviously. It's a god after all. But for realsies, there's these handbags that are depicted in all of these ancient depictions, right? In the stone tablets. And so I find that very interesting, that if it were just a story, just a myth, then why does it have that uniformity across the board? Or oftentimes they're often wearing like what looks to be like a wristwatch, right? Like, what's the deal with that? Why do all these gods have a wristwatch? And there are very specific gods that have them, and these handbags, and these are the gods that are supposedly there to restart humanity after the Great Flood. So a lot of questions, right, about the nature of God/gods. I'm starting to wonder if the monotheistic viewpoint is perhaps off. Of course, in the ancient times, you just sort of chose whichever god resonated with you. You worship that god, right? But perhaps there are many gods, right? And in all these ancient tales, there's depictions of these gods, and they're always fighting and battling each other, and they have all these anger issues and jealousy. And if you're to view it as a myth, of course that makes sense, because the scholars tell us that it's because it's just meant to reflect humanity, as above so below, right? but it's always been a head scratcher for me that these gods are acting like a bunch of buffoons oftentimes, right? Or a bunch of animals, just like slaughtering each other, bickering over just nonsense, right? And so, if these are enlightened beings from a heavenly realm that's just pure love and joy and peace, then what are they battling for? The ancient Greeks had gods like this. The Anunnaki were like this. The just all the cultures have these gods that are always battling each other. And I thought, like, what realm do they come from? Right? Because if they're supposed to be more evolved than us, then surely they would have moved past that types of behavior, right? And so I wonder if perhaps they are part of this realm that we are in, but we just can't see them for some reason. But they're also trapped in this dualistic um, realm, because oftentimes people have described who've had these out of body experiences or astral traveled or whatever, talk about how Earth is like a Russian nesting doll, right? Where it's just a series of layer upon layer upon layer, going outward and going inward, perhaps infinitely. And these are the different realms or dimensions or whatever you want to call them, right? And so perhaps it isn't until you get to the highest realms where you start experiencing that, pure bliss, joy, peace, love, etc. And then you talk about the lower realms with the demons and, you know, shape-shifting reptilians or whoever you think, the Nephilim. Um, but I do think that there is a group of beings or humans, I don't know, that are sort of running things around here. And I do believe that they don't have our best interest at heart. I don't think that they're on Team Human, is what I'm getting at. I just was listening to Alex Jones talking and Elon Musk, and they were talking about being on Team Human and how you have like Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates who are not on Team Human. They are trying to depopulate rather than populate. So um, I think that there's a lot of evidence that there is a group of people or beings that are actively trying to keep us down. I think that we are naturally a spiritual being in ways that I think that we've forgotten as a species, that we've lost many of the old ways, the magic. We have remnants of it today with psychic powers. I think we're all psychic. Some are more in tune with it than others, of course. Um, I think that we have the ability to levitate and move shit with our mind and manipulate this reality in ways that we can't comprehend. And I think that there's been an active process of suppressing those powers or those memories of what we truly are capable of. And the way to do that is through fear, is one of the main ways of doing that, of keeping our vibration low, of keeping us in a constant state of fear. Pumping chemicals into literally everything, right? Plastics and etc. Chemicals. Um, I think that there is an active campaign to eliminate that in people and to put a damper on those spiritual powers, perhaps, right? Um, but I think there's a lot of talk of good versus evil and Armageddon and all of that stuff, and this is the final battle. I don't view it that way. I think that everything is unfolding exactly as it needs to, and I can feel the shift in consciousness. I can feel the shift away from war, the shift away from aggression, the shift away from duality and politics. And why are we still doing this? Why are we still acting that way? Why is this still acceptable? That sort of thing. So um, I just feel like we're on a good path. And for me, I had to get myself to a place where I just don't panic about it anymore. Right? I just have to trust that there's a higher power that's in charge around here. That's a higher power than the reptilians that are running the world. But of course, I think about aliens a lot, and I've been thinking about there's a real fringe area of of what am I trying to say? X of Twitter, that there was some whispers and some videos of these 10-foot or 12-foot shadow beings that were in Miami in this mall, and all the conspiracy theorists. I say that as a proud conspiracy tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, but I don't believe them all. Right nowadays, I'm scrutinize everything and look at it with through a fine tooth comb. So there's a lot of people talking about these shadow beings out there, and it just he said that there's one eyewitness guy that was talking about how he's they looked like holograms, but really good ones. Which of course that technology exists, right? High quality, where you maybe can't differentiate that it's actually a hologram or not. So he said it felt like something different. It felt like something more than a hologram. Like there was something there, but he couldn't really put his finger on it. But they were walking around, but they were like gliding over the sidewalk, like it wasn't a real thing, like it was a projection or something, right? So I just kind of listened to it, and uh, I rolled my eyes a little bit. I'll be honest with you. It's just like, well, sure, maybe they were, maybe they weren't. There's talk of them being Nephilim, and I just think that there's a campaign, mostly by the government, but also media, which is the government nowadays, right? I think there's a campaign to keep us afraid, and I know that there's a lot of people that are very scared of the Nephilim. I've talked to a lot of religious folk that believe that the Nephilim are demons, and so if there's a bunch of demons walking around, that would definitely start freaking people out, right? Um, but it just feels fishy to me. All of it just seems kind of like lame and fishy to me. There's that, and then there's like, parading those guys in front of Congress, talking about the aliens and the Mexican mummies, in front of their Congress, and it all just sort of seemed like a nickel and dime pony show. Like it didn't have any substance to it. My intuition didn't go off. It just sort of felt like lame and deflated a bit. And then I started thinking about that and this stupid Nephilim story from Miami, and then remember a few years ago how those obelisks, those mysterious monolithic obelisks, started appearing all over in weird places, in the middle of the Arizona desert, and in Russia and all this. And I was like, "What? The aliens are here! It's a sign." But I just never felt like it was disclosure. Like this is it. It just kind of felt lame. Like there. I just think that there's a campaign out there to sort of it's a disinformation campaign, sort of. Like I know that not to. Well, I'll put on my tinfoil hat, but the CIA has been known for shenanigans. um, And so it wouldn't surprise me if these sorts of events, like the shadow beings or the obelisks or whatever, being cooked up by them for their own reasons. If it's not just confusing the populace or misdirection or whatever you want to say, but it all just seems fake. And so I'm still waiting for I don't know if it's going to be an event or if it's just going to be a slow unrolling, which is probably what's going to happen because most people can't handle, um, mass disclosure. Just suddenly seeing ships in the sky or whatever, I think would freak people out, but um, in an obvious way. But like, if you have looked into UFOs or aliens or any of that stuff at all beyond like Roswell, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that there are aliens here. Arguably, they've always been here, but they're definitely here. They've been here since at least the 40s, according to the Roswell shit. Um, but I think that humanity is just slowly wrapping their mind around the idea that, like, well, they are actually here. And what does that mean for us? And like, if they're here to harm us, they would have done that already. And I don't think it's just one species. I do think that I think there's multiple, many species here. The Greys, of course. The Pleiadians, I wonder about, because a lot of channelers talk about the Pleiadians, and oftentimes these things sort of get injected into spiritual circles, and then that just becomes, the word. It becomes a Bible for us of a spiritual nature, where yes, of course there's Pleiadians, but like, where did that come from? Why are you saying that? Same thing with like Nibiru. I talked in my last episode about Nibiru, and you know the Anunnaki using the humans as enslavement for gold, and all of these things. They were just translated by one man, Zechariah Sitchin. So maybe that's right, but maybe it's not. It's just based on one interpretation. So I question the Pleiadians. I've never, just because I've never seen one, right? But I believe that sure, there's probably Pleiadians out there, Arcturians, right? All the gang, all the all the favorites, the whole cast of characters. Are there malicious entities out there, or beings out there, or extraterrestrials out there? Yes, sure. Yes, of course. Um, are they draining us of our, are they feeding on our negative energies? Are they feeding on our fears? Yeah, sure, sure. I'm not losing sleep over it, but yes, sure, sure. Um, but all of this I have to just constantly put into context that there's also a very good chance that none of this is real, right? I think too often we dismiss that essentially all of the world religions and ancient philosophies, they all talk about how this place is an illusion. This is not the real world, which is then confirmed by people who have had these out of body experiences, who say that's not real. When they're on the other side, they say this is more real than I've ever witnessed in my life. Like, the colors are more real, the air just feels more real, the sound is more real. So it's a fun little game to try to figure out what's the nature of reality, and are there, how many aliens are here, but also, like, maybe we're never meant to find out. Maybe that's just the nature of this program that we found ourselves in, this matrix, and to just um, realize that none of it might be real, right? That all of these things that we strongly believe in. Um, I've never had these experiences. I've never had an out of body experience. I have never spoken with an Arcturian or a Pleiadian or a Grey. I've never, been probed. Although my first car was a Ford probe, so that's kind of like half point for that one, I guess, right? But, um, yeah, these are the things I'm thinking about this week. A lot of extraterrestrial talk. Just hearing other people's perspectives, what they think about it. And then I start to wonder if this whole idea of disclosure, because once you start hearing it all the time, once you start getting into these spiritual circles, and well, you know what I'm talking about, just spiritual circles that talk about this sorts of thing. Um, there's a lot of talk about just about things of this nature, right? And I like to question it all, and not take it as the word of God, and realize that sometimes these things get injected into the conversation, and then it's real easy for us humans to latch onto it and make it a part of our beliefs. And there's nothing right or wrong with any of that, but just recognizing that your beliefs are based on a book, or your beliefs are based on one guy's translation of ancient scriptures, or what a pastor said, or what the spiritual guru said, um, and it's all with what we resonate with, right? So I'm not condemning any of those things, to each their own, but just to recognize that we are not our beliefs, we are not our thoughts, we are something far grander than that, and that is what I'm exploring. That's the journey inward. Love you. End transmission.